Like and subscribe for more Army football analysis. Shop our store today. Go Army! Beat Navy!
Welcome to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. The Army Football Show is an insider's guide for cadets, old grads, and college football fans to follow the Army team throughout their season as they seek to beat Navy and claim the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Ask for Football is brought to you by our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or just exploring your options, Jocelyn Bradley is the expert you can trust to navigate the real estate market with ease. Visit jocelynbradley.com to learn more. And let's get started at the Ask for Football Army Football Show. Welcome back, everybody, to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. I'm your host, Rob. This is going to be a very interesting conversation today. We've got Kelvin White. He's returning friend of the show, former Army football player, and he's got lots of insights. He actually had the opportunity to go back to West Point and talk to some of the players and the candidates, but we have to formally intro the show. So, hey, our day is in the books. Cadets are coming back to the academy. The summer is basically over. There are folks at West Point that are doing their best to impact the long-range line, and we have Kelvin White returning. I'm your host, Rob, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Kelvin is calling to you, I'm assuming, from the Nike headquarters in the great Pacific Northwest, which is super cool. We got lots of questions about that, and we know that you probably can't get into them, but I'm sure everybody wants to know what the jerseys are going to look like for the 250th. I think everybody's waiting with bated breath, but we'll see what happens. But without further ado, Kelvin, please remind our audience of your class, your branch, and yeah, we'll start there. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for having me back, guys. Kelvin White, class of 2016, recruited quarterback, played tight end, wide receiver, tackle, long snapper, whatever the team needed. Branched infantry, stayed as a graduate assistant the year that we beat Navy. It was also the Nike uniform model that year that represented the 82nd Airborne Division. Served 9 years honorably on active duty. I got that +1 for the prep school. And since then I've been, at Notre Dame getting my MBA and currently sitting, in Oregon, Pacific Northwest, doing a summer internship at Nike World Headquarters. That is bonkers. And I totally did not know that until you told me that you were the model for the 82nd Airborne uniforms, which is like even super cool. That like gives you another feather in your cap. So, so again, we'll dive into the Army stuff, but how is it being at Notre Dame? Is it like, have you bumped into anybody on the team? Have you got the opportunity to talk to the players? Because ball is ball, right? Like college football is college football. So having somebody that experienced that at the Division I level, being able to interact with players and Army guys, as much as we had our druthers last year with the Shamrock series and, Notre Dame trying to advertise that they support military, which they do. But I mean, it's a little bit different, like having served, in a combat infantry unit, vice, some of the other things that have happened post GWAT. But how is it around campus? Like, do you get, have you had the opportunity to meet any of the players or talk to anybody on the team? Yeah, and I think part of the cloth that we're cut from going to school in West Point is that you kind of like move to friction points. And if there are no friction points, then you identify the closest thing to it. And part of my thing is what I give and I instill and I kind of share my stories, like closed mouths don't get fed. So if you want something to happen, you've got to go make it happen. So I can't tell you how much I've thought about becoming a coach, doing the teach, coach, mentor thing. But ultimately at the time of my life right now, it's not in the cards for me. But once you get close to the sun, you can either fry an egg or get burnt. And I think I'm trying to fry an egg right now. And to your question, yes, I am supporting the Notre Dame football team. I work with the career counselor here at Notre Dame, also with the career or the football player development staff, and just try to show them, especially in the kind of landscape that we're operating in, the NIL and college football in general. It's the Wild West. And when I say that, I mean it is way crazier than people put on for. And part of what drives me is just making sure that the people that are coming to Notre Dame, which
it's really it makes me happy because Coach Freeman has a really good program there, and the guys that are coming to Notre Dame already have a pretty good head on their shoulders, right? So you don't really have to, change anybody's like mindsets or thoughts, but ultimately these guys are all 4 stars, 5 stars. Yeah. And it's really, really important to know that college football, sport, you name it, is a vessel. And you have to kind of take away like what you can to live your life. Because one day, regardless of how good you are, if you're the best football player ever, it's going to end one day. And the best people take the most from the game. And really that's what I try to do for the guys here is show them kind of what's in me, not on me. You can get a little bit of money now, but, all of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my, service, fatherhood, parenting, whatever, my barometer and the litmus test that I have is, from the stuff that I took from college football: perseverance, persistence, faith and confidence in myself, and then, physical and mental toughness. And I think being able to share my story and share kind of how I've transitioned from football to career, from career to pivoting to an MBA, and then an MBA to getting into one of the most sought after MBA internships that has less than 1% acceptance rate is, you kind of talk about it, then you be about it. And I think showing those guys that is something that I'm grateful for.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. And I think that's one of the things that like everybody struggles with. And I was doing some research preseason, not to turn this into college football roundtable, but think about it. Look at what happened with Drew Westermaker, right? 0-star recruit. Now this guy's at Oklahoma State and has made $7 million in 2 years, right? Now, does that mean he's going to go to the NFL and play like gangbusters? Question mark. Who knows, right? Oklahoma State's in a rebuilding year. So like, yeah, you're getting a fat pile of cash, but you're going to a team that, did not perform well last year. And I think that's
Rob, but the thing is, and you know this, not from us, from playing football at West Point, and West Point is like one of the sacred, I think, all service academies where they're trying to figure out what the future looks like. But ultimately that Oklahoma State team all came from North Texas, right? Yeah. So like the same thing that Kurt Signetti did. And like you have guys from JMU that are national champs right now that came from IUP and followed him to JMU and then followed him to Indiana. And it's like, that's kind of like the art and science, the beauty of whatever the matrix is that you want to call college football. But, even though Oklahoma State did not do well last year, there might be 65 or 70 new guys, and that's a brand new team. So it's one of those things. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'd set the over under at 8 wins, because they'll pull it out. And one of the things that has changed though, and we'll tie this back to the service academy, right? Is simply this: like the service academies will be advantaged the longer name, image, and likeness goes on. And the reason why is because you're going to find the kid that wants to play the sport, and they're going to go to play the sport, and that sport's going to be funded, it's going to be contained, and they're going to be able to perform on the field and do that. There's not going to be as many distractions for name, image, and likeness. And like, am I going to get paid? Is this going to work out? Is it not going to work out? It kind of goes away. And that's the advantage that West Point has. And so, speaking of advantages that West Point has, like you had the opportunity to talk to the team a couple months ago. Like it's taken us a long time to get this thing scheduled and get it on the calendar. But, what was your message when you talked to the team? Because I mean, I'm assuming that it was similar to what you talked to the Notre Dame players about, but it's probably a lot more focused because, ball is ball, but going to West Point and having that cadet experience is a little bit different than, going to Notre Dame or to Indiana or to some other school. So what did you impress on the players?
Yeah, I had the extreme fortunate opportunity to go back a couple, I guess it would have been a month ago now, but really twofold. I got to talk to the recruits, so the candidates that were recruiting and had offered. And, I think part of Coach Monken's messaging was like one of my teammates, class of 2015, was getting married the same weekend. So there was a bunch of former players in town and leveraging our experiences that we've had. Because, I mean, I don't know, I'm assuming it was the same for you, but when I was 18 and we had these old grads come in and talk about what life on the other side is like I don't care. Like I didn't care. You know what I mean? I was like,
yeah,
dude, I'm 18 years old. I know everything. I don't want to hear it from you. And now being on the opposite side, right? 2.5 kids, transitioning from the military, what I would call a successful career for me. Being that old guy is crazy because listen, and especially when you have Coach Monken, who coached me, who's still there, who's only tenured, out tenured by one guy in the entire NCAA, Dabo. And it's like, I still feel connected to that program, right? Like my best friend stood next to me in my wedding, Luke Prue, is back there now. He's transitioning out. He'll go to prep school to coach this fall. But it's like, I still have that connective tissue to where, like, Coach Monken is texts me, calls me, checks in on me. Like that's still my coach. You know what I mean? So it's, not that West Point football is not any different for, guys like you or guys that are before Coach Monken, but it's like that connectivity to the program is like something that I can't even, begin to explain how fortunate I am for that. But back to the question, I got to speak to the candidates, and obviously my message was that of, hey, like if you come here, you stay here, you'll become a champion. And part of what I tell them and what I tell people from Notre Dame or student athletes from Notre Dame is like, one of my mentors mentioned NFL means not for long. So you could be the best player on this team and something bad could happen to you, like God forbid, but it is having that ability to, again, take the things to grow and develop as a leader, as a man, as a provider, whatever you want to call it, but take from the game more than you give it. I mean, honestly, like you think about it, like you got to college because of the sport. You're going to, you may get to play at the next level, but what is it that you're going to keep with you forever? And I think being able to identify those things, I've already mentioned some of them, is important. And then I did have the opportunity to meet with a lot of the players. They were there obviously over the summertime, doing STAP summer classes.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't very, a powwow as such, but talking to individual guys, just seeing like how they're feeling, like what their concerns are with branching, what their concerns are for, school, fall. And, they've been around, they're champions as well, right? Some of those guys played on the team that was 12-0 before they played Notre Dame. So they know what it's like to win an AAC championship. They're already champions. And I think, I wrote an article the other day about trash bags and culture change. And I think that they're generations behind me in the sense that I don't know that Coach Monken is like that anymore. I think that obviously he still got it in him. Like he's a silver-haired fox and he's got that dog in him still. Like I saw it but I don't know that he has to enforce that anymore because it's just team after team. They pass down that leadership and the mentality and the enforcing standards and what right looks like. And it's the standard is much higher than when I was there. And I'll just say that. And I'm very comfortable saying that because we were trying to figure it out. And now it feels like you're walking into a championship caliber football team and program. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting. And that's one of the things that like, it used to be it was a cliche in college football, right? A team is only as good as its seniors. And now with name, image, and likeness and transfer portal and everything else that's going on, like you don't see that as often, right? I mean, if you look at, part of the success that, the Squids had last year was because they had guys that had played together since high school, and there was such a tie, relationally with those guys. And, with a relationship like that comes a lot of accountability, right? So like, hey man, you let me down. And that's not it's not like a coaching thing, but it is a coaching thing. Like it's the player coach. It's the guy in the locker room that everybody respects, that when he comes over to you and says, hey brother, like, what are you doing? It's going to get the intended result because that person is well respected. And I think, early in organizations, when you have to enforce change or make change, sometimes it has to be more significant. But at the end of the day, what you want is a organization that self-heals, right? The coaches are there to give the players direction, the players execute. And if somebody's out of line, can coach do it? Yeah, 100%. But, one of the most brutal things, and, you being a Ranger cat, this, right?
what's the hardest review that you can get in the military? From your peers, right? So if you get, peered low or peered in the middle of the pack from your teammates or your position group, then you're like, oh crap, like maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. And the light comes on a little bit. So, you got to go there right before our day. So, do you have an interesting our day story? I have an interesting our day story. I've told it a bunch on here, so I will reserve that, but I will pass it on to you because I know, our day is a little bit different for the players. And so, I just asked to see if there was anything that kind of comes to the top of your mind.
So I would consider the second our day wasn't too crazy. You know what I mean? Cause like I went to prep school. So like,
okay,
that was the first time for me, but my prep school. So CCBT, my cadre was he was a rising cow. So he's a junior, going to be a junior.
Yeah.
And my platoon sergeant, squad leader, I guess. But he was a combat medic. So he had deployed with a whole bunch of times. He had his combat medic patch and looking back on it now, like that dude was like terrifying to me. But then he was a cadet, you know what I mean? So it was like at the end of the day, we're all in this thing together. But I will say he tore me up something good. Like we made the walls sweat a couple times. But at the end of at the end of the day, like I'm here, I'm stronger, I'm better for experiencing that. But my our day experience was the S1 NCOIC. Her name is escaping me right now, but she was this lady with a very loud voice. And my government name at the time was Hockenbrock White because I was hyphenated. And, I get up to, the table and I was like, couldn't get my name out. And she's like, just say it. Is your last name Jumping Stick? Just say whatever. And I was like, what is happening? She was just dogging me out. But it's funny to look back on now. And like, we could tell stories about that stuff, but it was an experience. And I think it's one that I'll never forget.
Yeah. I think cherishing those moments, and there's all those little things that happen throughout the course of your time at the academy that like all the stories add up. And then there's like legitimate stories where you're like talking to your roommate and like literally on our class reunion, I was like, hey, talk to my roommate, Chris Ponting. I'm like, Chris, remember this? And he's like, yes, see, I told you, man, like I wasn't crazy. Like Rob remembers too, and so it's always interesting, the experience of being at cadets at West Point and just some of the things that happened. Did you get a chance to take a tour of the new stadium?
So I did not get into the east, the suites over there and stuff, but it's sick. It looks very cool. Yeah. But I haven't been back in a couple of years. So like, I almost don't know what it looks like. Don't remember what it looked like from before. But it will absolutely add, value, and it's going to look, tremendous. So I'm excited for those games. My 10-year reunions this fall. So, maybe I could pop into someone's suite or something. I don't know. Anybody watching this, let me know if you got tickets.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I think, because of the proximity to New York City and, all the big business in New York City, and like West Point is a beautiful place in the fall. So like if I had a client meeting, I absolutely, and they're football nerd, we're doing it at West Point, like for sure, because I think it's a huge deal. One of the other huge deals, and we'll roll right into that too, is like the partnership with USAA. We talked about it on the show. What are your thoughts on it? Because I think, the more support that we can get to the athletic association at West Point, the better. And since, we can't have NIL sponsors per se, I think having a strategic partnership with a brand is military focused as USAA is not bad, but I'd open the floor to you and, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't want it to get out of hand. And I'm not going to put any like rules or boundaries on it, but I think Theo's doing a phenomenal job of, putting us first and like what is important, and kind of just like, milling through the minutia of people reaching out to try to, get like quick wins for soldiers and just like being like those people that are just like, empty. It's empty. I think USAA has kind of proven again that they're committed to service members and their families. And I think it's a phenomenal thing. I think we have a bunch of them with like MCOR and, all of the ones that we've had since I played there. But then I think it opens up the aperture for, more activations for Army Navy, right? For Nike. I'm sitting in the building here, but it's like, what does that look like now that the latitude is expanded? And I think it takes it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of figure out what that looks like, but having the ability to do that, I think it's great.
Yeah. It also goes back to, having a grand strategic partner. I think like some of the smaller ones are strategic, and then like USAA is grand strategic. And I say that because it's more than a national brand. It's an international brand. People know USAA, and you know what? And my big point that I had when we were on the other show was simply this. It's like people have been getting cow loans from USAA as far back as I can remember, so it's not like the partnership wasn't in existence before we got there. Right. So
right.
I think that's one of the things that we have to look at. But before we wrap this up, I just got one other question for you. And that question is, what are you looking forward to or looking towards this college football season with the Army team? Like, what are your thoughts? Anything that's you're concerned with? Anything that you think we should know as an audience, or we should pay attention to that we may not see because like we're football nerds, and like the hardcores look at the position groups that they like to look at, but some people are just tracking the ball, something that we need to know.
No, I think two things. I think it's very important that we have Kale coming back as quarterback. While we were in the green room before this, I think the past years that we've had the number one guy coming back, we've had success back to, Ahmad Bradshaw and then Kelvin Hopkins and then, Bryson Daly. I think you get those reps and sets, and then you don't really necessarily have to worry about that. Obviously, like, God forbid injuries or anything like that, but like having the ability to have that person is good. And then the other thing I'm extremely excited about is Daryl Dixon being the defensive coordinator. Daryl came in when I was when I was a graduate assistant, was his first year, and kind of seeing him develop and move from the linebackers to the safeties to, associate defensive coordinator to now defensive coordinator it is cool. He is a extremely educated football player, obviously a pretty good football player himself. And I think over the past 10, 11 years, he's proven that he has the capabilities and the facilities to coach us at that level. So I am really excited to see, how he gets into it. Especially from the guys who are that he is replacing is, Jay Bateman, who was, maybe the best football mind I've ever been around. And then, to Coach Woody, who had phenomenal seasons with West Point. And now I think it's a new chapter for Daryl, and I'm really, really excited. I got to chat with him when I was back there. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with the defense.
Yeah, that's good. And like for me, and I'll be quick, so we're not to drag this thing out too much longer, and I'm not dragging it out. But the reality of it is like, look, as always, front seven play, right? I love the TNTs. I love the linebackers. I'm finally starting to see it on social media, like some football nerds that have like graduated from college, and they're like, hey, look, if you got a linebacker that has awesome numbers, that means this defensive line is doing their job, And so those are the things that I'm looking for. So like if you have a quarterback that has time to throw, that means his offensive line is doing well. And like we've got two notable offensive linemen, like Brady Small is going to have like over 3,000 snaps as a starter at West Point, which is unheard of, particularly at the center position, so that is pretty incredible. And Paulo Generelli, like that kid's a stud too. And so we're going to see what those guys do, but they're critical pieces of the rest of the front seven on the offensive side. And then on the defensive side, this may be one of the best defensive lines that we've had in a while, And that's always impressive. And, and then the only question marks I have, of course, is the defensive backfield. But we say that every year, because we always have guys moving up and graduating, and you're like, oh my gosh, they are not as good as the guys last year. And then, give them time in the summertime to kind of brew and get ready. And those guys usually perform as advertised. And I think the last thing, going into last year, I think there was a little bit of a question mark at the quarterback position, back to what you were talking about. Like, when we know who the guy is, I think the offense performs better because they're used to his style of play. They're used to him in the huddle. They're used to the way he just does business. And it's nothing, it's nothing against Dwayne Coleman, and it's nothing against Cale Hillams. It was just like, both of those guys had huge shoes to fill after Bryson's year, right? He was a generational athlete at West Point. It's kind of like anybody that, tried to replace Cam Scatterbo, right? Like, that dude's a freak show, right? Statistically, that guy was a generational athlete. You don't know it at the time, but then when you watched his play in the NFL as a rookie, you're going, oh yeah, that guy really is that good, And so I think it's just there's a barometer of performance. And I think the more that a guy gets a chance to develop in the Army system, particularly on the offense, the better they're going to be. And I think, we can expect good things from Cale this year. I think the biggest thing though that I'm looking forward to is just like beating the Squids, man. Like, the way that it sounds right now is it's a push as far as recruiting is concerned. Navy has a little bit more returning production from last year, the FPI being what it is, but like, all that preseason junk is preseason junk.
Right.
So last question, and then we will wrap. And I already know the answer. It's probably, I can't tell you anything because I don't know anything. Hints on the 250 uniforms from Nike. Anything? Have you met anybody that's dropped a hint or a clue, or do you have an NDA on your desk that you have to sign right now and you can't talk about it?
I have met a lot of people here. I've put, my little thumbnail on my Slack is the picture of me with the 82nd Division uniform on. So it is known that I am a West Point football player, and I am proud to be a West Point football player and uniform model. A cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do. My name is Bennett, and I ain't in it. So it is going to be great. That's what I'll say. It's going to be great. And I think part of it is, obviously, we all look forward to Army Navy, the uniform drops and all that stuff. That's cool. But it's also the 25th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll get to see some of something for that. I don't know what that is, but I've had the opportunity to meet Elliott Hill, the CEO of Nike, and part of this thing, right? Everybody talks about networking and this stuff, but it's like, I got to meet Elliott Hill, and then Coach Monken called him on my behalf, and then Elliott found me and then told me about what Coach Monken said about me and how the kind words that he used to describe me and all that stuff. So it's like, those are the things that you can't buy. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can't buy that because of the person that Jeff Monken is and the person that I am because of him. And then for him to reach out to, the CEO of one of the largest, most recognizable global brands in the world. And then to have that entire thing come full circle where he, comes up to me, takes a picture with me, and tells me about what Coach Monken said about me. And like, that's just another instance of all of the things that I told the current recruits and the candidates about. You just never know. So it's it is that thing of doing that. But I wish that I had some answers for you. I hope that when I come back to Nike one day, I am helping lead that charge, because there's some units out there in the world that I would love to put on to that stage in the second weekend of December.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. Kelvin, really appreciate you coming back on. As per usual, friend of the show, we always appreciate you coming back. It's always nice to talk to former players, because you guys typically have insights that we don't normally get, because you're closer to the team than we are. And, having the ability to go back and talk to players, current and former,
is one of the great pleasures that we have on this show, and it allows us to just remain connected to the sport that we all love, but also gives us an opportunity to share insights about West Point, right? A lot of people don't have the same opportunity as we had to go to, the prestigious university, but it is what it is. We thank you again for your time. This is the As for Football Army Football Show. We are going to wrap this thing up. And as always, beat Navy.
Beat them.
That'll do it for this edition of the Ask for Football Army Football Show. Big thanks to everyone riding with us each week as we break down the Black Knights, the season, and everything that makes Army football special. Before we get out of here, a huge thank you to our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. Whether you're buying, selling, relocating, or just trying to figure out your next move, Jocelyn Bradley is ready to help you find your way home. For the whole AFF crew, thanks for watching, thanks for listening.